combines, as we mentioned, material flow, it all starts right up here in the header. That's where grain enters everything. So it makes sense to start there. A couple things we want to do to begin with is we want to make sure we have the auger set right. We like to run that auger down and back as far as possible. Yes, we have strippers on the back that we can move the auger forward and run the strippers forward, but when we do that, the distance between our feeder house chain right here and our fingers, that gets wider. If it gets too wide, then it doesn't feed it in there good enough. So we like to keep it back as far as possible. So that's the first thing we're going to do, and then when we drop it, on the 600 series headers, we put a third stripper down in the bottom. And so you can see the two down on the bottom, then there's one straight in the back. Originally, when they first came out, they only had the very back one and then the one that's the bottom back right now. And they'd wrap easier because it was hard to get everything down tight enough. When we added this other one, it pretty much got rid of all of our wrapping problems, and it also allowed us to run our auger up a little bit more so it wasn't as critical. So where we used to have to be really picky, now it's just, if you're close, you're good enough normally. But we do like to run it back as far as possible, because the other thing that will happen is somebody will go in and decide their feeder house chain is getting stretched out, and so if they really force it and keep it a little tight, they can take a half link out and really draw it up so they don't have to worry about it for the next 2 years. So that's great, but if somebody did that and then somebody else set up the header and decided they're going to run the auger all the way out, and then they're going to run the stripper out on back, so we gained 3/4 of an inch there forward and lost 3/4 of an inch on our chain backwards, now we've just increased that gap to 1.5 inches. And so that's more of a gap than we want to have to fight with, and that's given us some backfeeding problems if the feeder house chain won't grab it right. Yes, really good crops will work just fine, but if you go to some lovely 25 bushel crop, it's going to come in here, it isn't going to feed very well. Something else we've gone to doing is, you see there used to be some more flight extensions right here. When these augers come from Deere, they come with 2 flight extensions on both sides, and then they said for STS combines you could take one off, or one time they were even saying keep them all on for STS combines, because all STSs are narrow body combines. You look at a 9600 over, or 9610 over there in the corner, and the width of that, it's 11 inches wider than these STS combines. This STS is the same width as the 9500 combine. So that used to be the narrow feeder house, and it was a wide body on the STSs. Well, now they've changed it because now we have a wide body STS, and our smaller STS has a narrower one yet. But that beside us, we've learned if you take all the flight extensions off, we're much happier with it. What we're doing is we were getting a lot of wear on our feeder house chain. Chains that on a 9600 we had run for 6-7 years or more, never have a problem with. We were finding at one time we were only getting 2 years out of an STS chain. And that's when we had all of our flight extensions on. So we took one of them off, never lost any productivity, and we were starting to feed up the sides a little bit better. So it's like, okay. A couple years ago we took the rest of them off, and we found now we're feeding up the sides and we're feeding in between the centers of our chain, so our center chain isn't stretching out. Used to be you'd look in there after you ran the combine a year and that center chain had a really nice droop in it. And so now getting rid of all the extensions, we're running up the sides of our feeder house, and now we're utilizing the whole feeder house for feeding. And then when we get to our crop accelerator, instead of having a big mound in the center and having to spread it out, we have 2 smaller mounds that we're spreading out, and we're finding that to work a lot better for the feeding part. So right there, that's something that's going to help us when we start fighting our white cap issue. Something else to look at here is let's make sure our reel's set okay. And we're talking about adjustments on the reel. Look down the reel pipe sometime. You could go to some headers, and I'm sure you could probably find some around here that are older headers or ones that haven't been done or worked on. And if you look down the pipe here and you see this bat here is offset, that's putting pressure on this pipe. I could go find some pipes in our scrap iron that have a war spot in here really bad because the things aren't straight. Really easy to straighten up. You just loosen the holes here, or the bolts here, spin the reel a couple times, they'll pretty much self-align, and then when they're lined up, tighten these bolts back up. Something to go through. We've really been looking into it more the past couple of years because of problems from years ago, and if we get these straight to begin with, when you go out, they're not going to wear out. You're not going to be doing real pipes and the bushings in it as often. So watch that. Speaking of bushings and pipes, so too, we're seeing more people have straw baled out of their fields. That twine, you'll pick it up, and it'll hook one of them, and a lot of guys won't think of it. Then it will hook another one. Before you know it, it will go all the way around it, and it will just make a nice tight little ball right here around your main tube with the reel bats involved. So if you get a piece of twine, stop, avoid taking out a reel because of that.
Jim?
Yes.
When you pull the extensions off of your auger, you add fingers to it?
Yes, you do. Thank you. We'll add another 7 fingers to it. Book says you don't have to. Book actually says on an STS don't run them. But we found that we've added the fingers, and that's been part of what's helped do the feeding of it. So I'd add them. On the back bench in the CP shop where we were at, you could see there's a whole bunch of combine parts, been kind of labeled as a header care package for these 600 series headers. And what it has in there is there's some fingers, some guides. Inside, those fingers are just held in with pins, something to watch for on these 600 series if you're getting a couple years old. I know we're at Raymond's, he's around somewhere. And I'm not sure how old this header was, but we were finding a lot of those pins starting to break, and we found several of them that we're looking at of headers that are 4 or 5 years old, that the holding pins for those fingers are broken or about to be broken, and you just need to go through and pop them out and replace them. Some of the aluminum caps that hold those fingers into the plastic bushing, some of those caps are getting worn out too. So that's all part of a package that we've kind of put together. People with new headers, basically what we have in there are the fingers and some pieces for inside there, a couple header height sensors, and a belt for on the auger drive, just a few, or not auger, the knife drive, the bushing for on the elliptical drive, and then some guards and blades. These guards are different than the 600 series. If you look at them, the guard has 2 shorts and 1 long, and the one next to it has 2 longs and 1 short. So be aware that if you're going from one header to a new one, you may not have the parts you want on hand. And then it also has a couple hold downs. So when we get over that in the combine, I'll talk about that belt a little bit more.
Hey, Jim, what's your input about, because like these reels come with the longer fingers, how do you short them, or what can you weave through them, like for spring wheat or spring barley?
Okay, Deere makes an extension that actually snaps in between them to drop it down to where it makes a bat right across right here in the center. It's in that little brochure. I didn't get any ordered up. Last year we ordered a few of them for some people. So that's one thing. Another thing to check is all your finger length. When we set the header, or when we send the headers out from here, we'll set them, we'll lay a 2x4 across here, and we'll spin them to make sure it's 1.5 inches off of that knife. The spec is 3/4 of an inch, but you could grab this reel and you could just flex it, and you could get about 3/4 to 1 inch of flex in that reel when you're driving across the field.
Well, my header's got a real nice curve to the fingers.
Yeah.
So I went through and I cut them off and made them straight, and then I lowered the reel.
Well, I wouldn't have lowered
Well,
it.
I got it down, I mean, within reason.
Okay. On yours is a 35-foot header. I'd make that at least 2 inches.
2 inches? Okay.
Yeah. Because if you're 1.5 inches, you'll still probably just barely clip the ends of them. And so, yeah, basically, we could get 1.5 inch deflection out of a 30-foot reel. So if somebody did go through and trim them and they all have a lovely frown, it's really easy to grab a reciprocating saw, and you could just zip, zip, zip right on down the line, set a chalk line to begin with, and trim them down, but then make sure that they're up. The other thing that you'll find is when you start getting a lot of age on there, they'll get pointed, and then they'll curl. Or if somebody ever set the header down on the ground and had the reel all the way out and down, it might curl a whole bunch of them. And so then you'll want to go through and trim them down, because curling them, or when they get curled, it starts throwing it, and it makes it aggravating for you. So anyhow, just watch that. We'll move around a little bit here. This pulley back here, so our knife drive pulley, that's the thing that sticks out the furthest. It's at the back of the header. If you like to cut with the left-hand side of your header against the ditch banks and around power poles and things like this, you will be replacing this pulley. So it's against what a lot of us have learned driving combines, but use the other end of the combine to go around things now. Just because there's nothing down on that end you're going to hurt. 600 series headers, we've done a lot more work on that particular pulley because it's been ran into things from how it turns and how it just slides this back corner into power pole. There's lots of these shields here that have a hole right about here where this nut's been shoved through. We know which way you drive now. So if you...
Because the auger's on this side, Jim.
Yeah, but when you come to that one rock patch, well, you're not in Douglas County, you don't have any. So when you come to those draws that are too green to cut, that have certain things in there, use the other side that we don't have to worry about breaking anything on. It will save you some time and money. That's one of the reasons in that care package that we put together, I have a belt in here, because when that happens, this pulley could calmly be beat back into shape, but it will twist that belt and roll it, and that belt will run upside down. I don't know how much slipping it does, but it will continue to run. So just be aware of that. When we're talking about adjusting auger heights, right up here, this bolt here, if you look at this, there's just a little bit of gap on the front side. When we tighten this bolt, we do not want to tighten these nuts down against that plate. If you tighten it, it's going to kink that bolt and it's going to snap it. And then that auger will continue to drop down on you, and then you'll be doing a few fingers and a few other things. So we want to keep a little bit of gap on the bottom of that nut. We want to jam those two nuts together. You could have an 1/8 inch gap in there, it's going to be fine. What's going to happen is if you have too much, that auger is just going to raise up on you. But I'd rather have that auger raise up than have you tighten those two nuts together and pinch that down and then snap that bolt off. So that bolt's another thing that's in that package. So check that. If they're tightened down wrong, they will break. Okay, coming back around. The feeder house belt, 70 series, is spring tensioned, so you no longer have to worry about it as long as you have that spring in there. So we don't have to worry about having it too tight and wearing on sprockets more. But at the same time, we still have this belt we need to worry about. This is a common thing we see adjusted improperly. If you have a variable speed feeder house down here on the bottom of this sheave, you have a gap in here that should be an 1/8 inch gap. If you're running a corn head, on here you're going to be running the upper variable up and down. So here we want to have the upper variable all the way open, the lower one all the way closed, and check that gap in there. The quick, easy way to increase that gap is just raise this pulley up. Needless to say, it's the wrong way to do it. If you do that during the middle of harvest, that's fine, but to start out your year, we want to have this pulley just sitting here, just putting a little pressure on this belt to get rid of the slap here. The proper adjustment is right up here. You have 3 bolts down here that need to be loosened, and then you have the tensioner right here that you can loosen, and you could go forward with it or back with it to obtain that 1/8 inch gap, and you want to spin this pulley around. That gap is the same on all these combines that have a variable speed feeder house. It doesn't matter if it's a 7700 that you have with variable speed feeder house or 9610 or 680. You got to maintain that gap. When you make that adjustment though, it does change adjustment on this feeder house drive belt. So before you do that, you have to loosen the tensioner here so that allows you to move it forward. Otherwise, you're going to put lots of tension on that. So we want to keep that running the right speed. Right speed is 490 to 510 or 520. It's going to be right in that area. Some people have gone in and thought, my knife isn't cutting clean enough, especially on a 900 series header, so we're going to speed it up, because if we speed this up 30 RPMs, it's going to speed the header up, or the knife up. Yes, it does, and it will shake your knife to death too. So if you're having lots of problems blowing knife heads apart, look at your back shaft speed. See what that is. So we come from there, and then we go into our crop accelerator. We've already talked about how we're feeding it the full width of our feeder house. That's going to help us clean it better because we're feeding it the full width. We're going to hit our crop accelerator. It has a high and low speed on there. If you're getting somewhere around 70 bushels an acre or so, or lots of straw, that's kind of where it's borderline. You could go either way. Normally I'll probably run up closer to 80 bushels an acre before I swap the crop accelerator into high. If we could keep it in low, it's a lot less power that it's requiring, and we're not breaking up our straw as much. If you're down south where the straw is really dry and brittle, if we break that straw up before it even gets into our cylinder, then it makes it that much harder for us to keep it long to send it out the back end of the cylinder, so then in turn we start to overload our shoe. So that's where we're about to start taking care of the business with it. So we're going to come out of here. We have the tri-flow feed ramp, and you can kind of see it on that combine there if you want to go in there and look at that and see how when we're feeding it into the cylinder, we're feeding it in several spots. And when we start to feed it in, how it goes around, that's where we start being critical with the leveling of the concaves. We talked about threshing elements a little bit. This threshing element here, it started out as a smooth element here. That's what the 50 series had. Now they have a rib on there, and the rib is close to ½ inch thick. So if you have a 50 series concave or combine with the original threshing elements on it or that style, when you put new ones in, don't put these ones in. Get the new ones. They're a whole lot thicker because you have the ½ inch rib on top of this before you get to this material. What we're finding causes this hole right here is running that concave open. If we ran that concave closed, we're going to be wearing this lip down here, and that's the lip that grinds, basically would be grinding out against our concaves. What we like to do is we want to fluff everything out. The 9600s, we kind of ground everything out. You ran internationals, you ground everything out. Here, the further back we go on our cylinder, the further open we get it. And so we're going to enter our concaves, and we're going to keep it open. If that slide chart that I forgot to bring out, you can look at that, and it will give you different recommendations. And a lot of times, Deere's recommendation is only about 12 maximum on the concave. I like to run closer to 17, 18, 19, somewhere around there, because if you're doing that, we're going to keep all that grain opened up, or the material opened up. We're not going to get the wear. We're not going to have the leading edge break down. We are going to wear on the back edge of it, but that particular element had probably 2 or 3 times the life on it than one that ran on a combine that was tightened down all the way. So that's where we're going to start gaining, is by opening it up. So now at this point we're in our concaves. We have it open. We've leveled our concave, so we know we're using that whole distance to do the cleaning of it. Another thing I like to do is on the first concave, I like to put 3 blockout plates on it. The reason I put 3 blockouts on it is I want that material to stay on that whole concave to where it's rubbed out, but we're not grinding it out. We're just gently rubbing it out because how open we are. And then when we get across that concave, then we're going to allow the grain to start falling out. If we have lots of white caps, we might add more, but we'll get to that part in a bit. Because we need to know what we're going to do with our rotor speed. Rotor speed, commonly I like to have somewhere around 750 to 800. It's going to vary a little bit. If it's really tough in the morning, we might open it up or speed it up. Concave clearance is used to grind things out. Rotor speed is used to get rid of white caps. So if you're having a white cap issue, if we speed that rotor up to 950, we might even run it all the way up to 1,000. That's going to sit there, and that's going to beat that white cap out. You do have to watch where you don't open up the concave too much when you speed the rotor up that much, because you can get a dead zone in there, and then nothing really works right for you. But with the blockouts over here, see, we don't have them in this combine yet. Normally what I like to do is I'll have this front concave blocked out. I found that if you ever have a spot where you don't need it blocked out, it's a whole lot easier just to open it up and keep them in there. And then if you've got really tough conditions, the next concave, a lot of times I'll have hardware in it to where we could put the next set of concaves in it, or blockouts in it. So if you are in a really tough threshing condition, then you could stick them in easily. It doesn't take much to stick them in. You hook the other side. There's a handle on this side with a strap that latches them in. You can see them on that S680 over there. See how they are. So from there, we're going through. Not a whole lot we could do on our tines except decide where it looks, or how it looks down on our shaker pan. Have anybody ever done a power shutdown? Okay. Years ago, people hated doing power shutdowns because when they did it, you got a hot engine you're turning off. Well, you don't have to do it that way. You don't have to turn off that engine. All you got to do is, as you're going along, fully loaded, been loaded for a while, reach over there, hit idle, and flip your separator switch off at the same time. It's going to stop just as quick as if you actually turn the key off, because it's actually done just the same job, because now we're engaging everything electronically, and you never had to shut down that hot engine. So what you're going to do, get it going and do that power shutdown, and at that point, when everything clears, come over here, take your panels off the side, or you can look in the back. If you look in the back, if you have a spreader, it's easy to do that. Chopper, it's a little more work to look in. But what we want to do is we want to see how it's sitting on the shaker pan and on our shoe. If everything's going right, it's going to come out of our rotor, and it's going to drop on the shaker pan. You're going to have a nice level, uniform material mat there. Most of the time that isn't quite how it is, but if we could get it that way, we're going to utilize the full width of the shoe. We already decided we were utilizing the full width of our feeder house, so we just need to continue on with that theory. To regulate where it goes, you take these time blockouts, put them in or take them out, whichever way you need to go with them. They normally come right out. And so that's how we're going to control it. If we have lots of material on this side and very little on the other, we're going to put another row of blockouts in here and maybe pull one out of the other side, because we want to allow material to fall down there evenly. Or maybe just the whole thing is just solid up there. If the whole thing is just lots and lots of chaff, all that chaff is going down onto our shoe. We've already decided it's the width of a 9500, and so we know we're narrower than the 9600 you traded off, so we need to keep that straw up above. And so if there's too much down here, maybe you need to add a row to both sides of this. Or maybe we need to open our concave a little bit. If your concave was at 15, we're grinding it out too much, we're shoving too much straw down there. So you got to decide how we're going to keep it up on that rotor. While I have this in my hand, one thing you want to do, they just went up, they're like 60 bucks each.
65.
65? Okay. A little bit of powder torch right here will give you an extra year or two, and it doesn't cost you 65 bucks to put a little bit of powder on there, so something to look at.
What about the spring? You get it hot enough for this?
No, if you take and you have it turned to the side like this, clean a little bit of the paint off, you can just put a little bit of powder right there. Okay. So you don't get hot enough to do anything else. If you happen to decide you're going to do it this way so you can go further, then that spring or that hook is just going to open up and it won't come back in there right. So that's why you want to make sure it's off to the side when you do it. Okay, so now we're at the point we've done our power shutdown, we've looked in the back, we've adjusted our time blockouts so we're close to where we want them. It isn't uncommon to see 4 on one side and 3 on the other. It's going to differ though on your machine. If you have a 50 series, you have a solid blockout up here on the other side, so you don't use as many. This one is going to take more. If there's any corn people in here, when you go out to do corn, these round blocks right here, you're going to take them out and put them between your grate blockout and your rail right here. And that's going to open up that area so you don't chew up your corn as much, or so you don't chew up your cob. And so closing your concave down to probably 12 or 13. So that's kind of what we've found works best in that. But once you start closing that chaffer, you really have to watch your wind, because you can get that closed down in a big hurry and then all of a sudden start sloughing a lot of things over. You may have to do a power shutdown and actually open up your tailings elevator when you're doing that, because if your tailings elevator is nice, good, clean wheat, then it isn't anything that you're going to accomplish with the sieve. It's all something that you need to accomplish back on the rotor. We want the majority of our separation done before it ever gets to this point right here. If we do that, then we have our white cap problem taken care of, and then everything that's back here is just light chaff, very little free grain. Any questions on that so far? I told you we'd be done by noon, and I'm running a little long.
Where are you running your fan at?
Oh, fan, yeah, thank you. That's going to vary on your machine too. 50 series, and I think it's early 60 series. They're going to be running the fan pretty much wide open. Wide open is going to be around 1200 on those. When they made a change on the fan, they all of a sudden dropped it down to, and I know it's all 70s. I don't remember for sure if it's at the last of the 60s also. They dropped it down to where 850 was about equivalent to 1200 on the previous model. So it isn't uncommon though on a 70 series to have the fan still running up at 1000 if you're in that club rule type condition that's just nasty cutting.
Is that still the same with an 80 series?
The new S's, the 9870s, that's going to be a little bit different because you do have a fixed, or you have the pre-cleaner and stuff is going to be fixed up there. By the time you're done, because you're running more capacity, it's going to be pretty close to the same. You do have a self-leveling shoe on that, and so there again, in turn, self-leveling shoe takes away a little bit of the air. So, yeah, by the time you're done, it's going to be about the same. The new S's, I did see something just the other day that they're talking about running the fan. I think it's about 80 RPMs less than the 9870s, but don't quote me on that yet because I need to go back and look at it. I don't have any experience with the S series combines in wheat. I did go out and cut corn last year. We had the combine for 4 days, and so I cut a lot of corn with it. And I know the differences we saw in corn compared to a 9870. And if half those differences carry over into wheat, we'll be extremely happy with what we're able to get out of our into our bulk tank as far as good clean wheat. After it leaves here, we do have a discharge beater that spreads it. It's our last shot. If there's any free grain, then it sends it forward. Then it goes out our chopper. The STSs have a tendency to blow up more to one side than the other, and so you can find that you get more of a windrow on one side from your chopper, or not more of a windrow. You see more debris out that one side than the other. There are some little veins in there that you can adjust. If you have a spreader, it seems to do pretty good with the spreader, getting it back down. But all of this that we talked about, how it enters, is exactly the same on a 9610. For how it enters is how it exits. There's a couple machines here with choppers. This one down here has a chopper on it. I don't see the owner here, so I'll talk about his machine. If you look at the straw chopper knives in there, his knives in the very center have less wear than the ends. So on his machine, he needs to put, it's just like 2 or 3 inches of flight extensions on that header that he runs on it. Then if he does, he'll get good uniform feed across that whole width of the separator. Because when we get feeding or crop dropping down onto our shoe, if it isn't uniform, you have that big blast of air with no product there. Any grain that's there, it blows it clear to the back. So that's why we're after it being uniform. We want that whole airflow to be uniform all the way to the back. So it's something that 15 years ago, I know messing with 9600s, we didn't really pick up on too much as far as the air and how much it evened out when it hit the shoe. But now we see it coming through the back, and we've seen what it's done. And if you know everything's uniform, being blocked uniform, it drops down into your clean grain and tailings a whole lot better. Any other questions on that?
In this combine, up here underneath the tine separator, did you add like a hillside kit? It's got taller.
Yes, there is an option on these. You can put a hillside or side hill cleaning kit on there to where the extensions are taller. They put some diverters to funnel it back down into the middle. And then they put some little funky flappers on the shoe, sides of the shoe, to keep it to where when you're on a hillside, it keeps it from settling out against its side. It throws it uphill all the time. And so, yes, you can get those kits. That's one of the kits in that little blue brochure that I have in there. So,
Now, does this combine have that?
yes,
I'll take a look.
Yeah, it does.
it does.
It does. It does in this part. I didn't look in the shoe, but
Yeah, well, if you see it up there, it's through everything. And yours, I believe, has it, Raymond. I think I remember putting it in that before you got it.
Thank you.
Small enough to know you, large enough to serve you. Your locally owned John Deere dealer, Evergreen Implement.